Hi, class. This is a book that we got in before we stopped going to school in, I don't know, March or April or something. And I really want a bunch of you to read this. Not just girls, but I am going to appeal to the girls. This is like a little library skills thing. This book is called What Would She Do? And so it's about 25 trailblazing women and what they would do in any particular circumstance. And it kind of goes into a little bit about what they came across in their life and how they overcame it. So this book, 25 True Stories of Trailblazing Rebel Women, is found in the nonfiction section, 920.72, and then this is the first three letters of the author's name. In the 920 section, 0.72, that's the Dewey Decimal System. In any of just about, I think it's over 10,000 libraries, I know you've heard me say this, in the world, if you go to that number in the library, you will find books on biographies, genealogy, which is like your family tree, autobiographies, correspondence of, famous people over the years, diaries, things that they reminisced about, and just about people with specific things. These are like important people, well-known people. So, we're going to go through this. So, what would she do? I'm going to open it up. And we have a lovely inside jacket. Here's one of our cover pages. Here's the regular one. And so I don't think that there's really a whole lot of real pictures, but a lot of drawings. And the illustrators, which you may or may not be able to see, are many. And they've done this for our characters. So in the table of contents, it shows you Cleopatra, the Trurung sisters, and there's a lot of different people over the years. You may recognize some of their names, but maybe not. But this is a wonderful book to see what women that were outspoken, or who were outspoken, what they did in situations that they saw come up. And we've got some very famous people there. Let's see. So we're just going to kind of flip. And here it says to us, congratulations. You've picked up a book that's bursting with awesomeness. Inside, you'll find the totally true stories of 25 women who changed the world in different ways. So I want you to read this as many of you as possible, because you think that you're young and you're insignificant, but all these women were young at the same time and thinking about things that they thought, needed to have some change. So, Cleopatra. She was one of history's biggest celebrities. Her life a whirlwind of war, romance, and tragedy. The last pharaoh of ancient Egypt, she famously fell in love with two of the greatest Roman leaders ever. Yet, she had a dark side. And it says, it's rumored that anyone who got in her way was assassinated, including family members. Okay, that makes her a little bit scary. And it makes her very powerful. And so, her quote, one of her famous quotes is, I will not be triumphed over. And so she's saying she's not going to let anyone, beat her. And it says, what would she do? The girls in school say that your clothes are all wrong. They're either too long, too fancy, too blue, too baggy, too floaty, too flowery, or too plain. Is there anything you can wear without them laughing at you? And what would Cleopatra, in her strength, what would she do? Easy. Cleopatra would do absolutely nothing. Nada, zilch. She'd know that other people's opinions don't matter when they're only designed to make somebody feel bad. Cleopatra would carry on wearing what she loved, probably a glitzy gold headdress, but you might not want to go quite that far and know that as long as she felt great, she'd look great too. Well, those are some lofty goals, but she's right. Why should you feel bad because somebody else doesn't like something you're wearing? That's kind of ridiculous. So we're going to skip to Joan of Arc, a teenage leader. Joan of Arc believed that God wanted her to save France from the English, so that's what she set out to do. The only problem was she wasn't a soldier. She was only a teenage girl. How could she dream of leading an army into battle? Yet, astonishingly, she did just that, and even though her victories were short-lived, she proved that it was possible for a woman to do the seemingly impossible as long as she believed in herself. So she was born somewhere 1412, died 1431, so she was about 19. And she was a French military leader. And so it says, the thought of speaking in front of the class fills you with horror. The teacher says you've just got to do it, but you can't. You can't. What would Joan of Arc do? Joan of Arc was just 16 when she spoke in front of entire armies. Yes, she was probably a bit nervous, but she did it. In your situation, Joan would make sure that she knew her subject matter, inside and out, back to front. She'd practice in front of a mirror or an audience of old toys. That's funny. She'd remember that her classmates were on her side and really wanted her to do well, and then she'd take a deep breath and go out there fighting. Okay. Let's see, what's the next one I was going to pick? Okay. Frida Kahlo, rebel artist. There's been kind of a lot of stuff about her, and I've been seeing her face on clothes, which I happen to love. But Frida Kahlo is famous for many things. She's famous for her artwork, especially her stunningly surreal self-portraits. She's famous for being a rebel, but perhaps she is most famous for being a feminist icon. Frida refused to act as everyone expected a woman to act. She did what she wanted to do, and she described her life story using art. And so here is one of the drawings from one of the illustrators. This is quite beautiful. She looks a little like Linda Ronstadt, huh? Well, your parents or your grandparents know who she is. So, her name was Magdalena Carmen Frida Kahlo y Calderón. She was born in 1907 and she died in 1954. Only 47 years old. She was a Mexican and she was an artist. And she says, this is one of her quotes, "The only thing I know is that I paint because I need to, and I paint whatever passes through my head without any other consideration." And so, in a what would Frida do moment, all the girls in magazines are tall and slim with beautiful clear skin. They don't have a pointy nose or a derriere, that's your bottom, the size of Texas. You can't even bear to look in the mirror because you think you look so totally horrible. And what would Frida Kahlo do? Frida Kahlo's eyebrows were so thick and bushy they met in the middle. She had a bit of a mustache. Did she care? No, she did not. If anything, she emphasized these features in her self-portraits because she was proud of the way she looked, and she would tell you to be proud too. So what if you're not tall and slim? So what if you have acne? That's because you're not airbrushed like the girls in the magazines. They might look perfect, but you're real, and FYI, for your information, you're fabulous. Okay, let's see. I think I have one other. Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks was a civil rights superstar. When Rosa Parks was born, parts of the U.S. were segregated, which meant that black and white people did many everyday things apart from each other. There were separate schools, separate swimming pools, separate bathrooms, even separate drinking fountains, and Rosa hated it. But surely not even she could have dreamed that her simple act of bravery would change everything. So what would Rosa do? You've been left out of a group text that includes other girls in your class. Why? You just don't know, and it's driving you crazy. What would Rosa Parks do? Rosa Parks didn't stand for discriminatory behavior. She thought that all people should be treated the same. She would want to know why you weren't being included, and she would tackle the problem head on. Rosa would contact the group that chat creators and ask them to stop being unfair. Chances are they'd back down immediately and add you to the group, but if they didn't, she'd protest, and she would make herself heard. And her quote is, "I would like to be remembered as a person who wanted to be free so other people would also be free." Well, that's all. That's about 10 minutes, and we don't really have a lot of time. Okay, I'm going to do this one last, because I love Jane Goodall, champion of the chimps. Jane Goodall is a primatologist, which means that she knows her chimps. She spent over half a century. Century is 100 years, so she has spent over 50 years patiently observing how they live and behave and interact with one another. But she isn't just the world's expert on chimpanzees. She works hard to protect them too. And even though she's now over 80, she still promotes the conservation of animals and the environment. And here's the illustrator's drawing of her. So let's see. She was born in 1934 and she's still alive. What might Jane do? You really, really, really want a pet. A cat, dog, rabbit, hamster, gerbil, fish. You're not picky. You quite like the sound of a bearded dragon, actually, but your parents say no. What might Jane Goodall do? This is a tricky one. Some parents just don't like the idea of a pet, or they could be worried that you'll get bored and they'll end up looking after it. We don't know for sure what Jane Goodall would say, but she might suggest you volunteer at an animal sanctuary or a rescue center for now. Then you can find out what it's really like to care for an animal for whenever you do own a pet. And she says, "My mother always taught us that if people don't agree with you, the important thing is to listen to them. But if you've listened to them carefully and you still think you're right, then you must have the courage of your convictions." Jane Goodall. We're going to stop this book for right now, but I encourage you to send a note to your teacher and say, "Hey, would you tell Mrs. P that I want to check that book out?" And I'll put you on a list. All right. See you later. Bye.